Thank you so much, Vikas. Great to meet you all. Just by way of intro, I'm Vineet, co-founder and CEO of Cogent Security. My background is really at the intersection of AI and security. I've been working on generative AI for over a decade now, so have a lot of experience in this space and in cybersecurity for almost that long as well. So prior to Cogent, I was at a company called Abnormal Security in the email security and collaboration space. Played a number of roles there, including running a large part of product development, product management, design, and a good chunk of engineering. Through that effort, I actually led a sizable part of our APAC office, including in India. So for Cogent, that is an area of focus for us as well. But in addition to that, I gained a lot of experience with vulnerability management and some of the difficulties in this space, which are only accelerating. So I know a number of you are doing your challenge. So to make life easier for you, I will keep my content brief and run through the slides here fairly quickly, and then I want to make sure we leave time for interactive Q&A as well. So really the framing here, right? I think a number of you have probably heard of Mythos at this point in time and probably have been tracking some of the things that have been occurring in the threat landscape. And so we at Cogent fortunately have very deep connectivity within the ecosystem, and a number of our close friends and partners actually have access to some of these advanced frontier models, whether at the labs or through the Glasswing program. And the results have been absolutely stunning, right? There's, yes, a lot of cost, sometimes false positives, but undoubtedly just a very large number of security bugs that have been uncovered. I think this visual actually tells the story very well, right? So you see the list of high and critical vulnerabilities by month and the explosion that is now starting. And so I think what this chart begins to tell us is that as we sit back and relax and look forward to the next several months and quarters, we have a tsunami of new vulnerabilities that are coming our way. So when you look at the typical life cycles and timelines here, right? Typically what happens is, you have a new CVE that drops, then a couple of days later, you have some humans that work for your scanning vendor of choice that are updating signatures and testing things. Now your scanner is ready to go and it's detecting vulnerabilities, which is great, but there's actually a couple day lag here. And now we live in an environment where with these advanced frontier models, any hacker can exploit vulnerabilities, even known ones, much, much faster than ever before, right? There's that stat that only a couple% of vulnerabilities are known exploited, 𝐸, things like that. Those numbers are going up significantly. So now what this means is vulnerability drops, it's getting exploited, and only thereafter do we, through our security programs, actually know about it. And you look at, not just the scanner lag, right? That's part one of this life cycle, but then everything else that has to go into this, right? Typically, once those scanner findings emerge, there's manual triage, you have humans in the loop, reading advisories, looking through the CMDB, figuring out what needs to be prioritized and how, routing it to people, helping those people do the fixing, right? And managing all the handoffs. And then now you might have engineering and IT teams that say they're doing the fixes and implementing these changes, but is it actually done, right? Maybe the ticket is closed, but your scanner still says it's open. All this ops and back and forth. And this really is the reason why it oftentimes takes months to get these critical vulnerabilities patched, right? They're being exploited at machine speed, but we're resolving them at human speed. So an interesting thought experiment is what if we could live in a world where you had AI agents, these intelligent digital workers that operated like your best employees, that could actually accelerate the life cycle from detection through remediation and compress all the steps here to meet the pace of the threat actor. So this is where, Cogent comes into the picture. And the way we've built the platform, it's AI native from the ground up, and there's a few core steps here. So number one, integrations across the stack, right? Plugging into a range of different tools. That could be everything from your traditional vulnerability scanners or CNAPP tools. It could be your application security tools, asset inventories, be it a CMDB, cloud platform. Threat intel, we partner with a number of different sources to deliver up-to-date real-time CTI. But we also are taking our AI agents and having them mine the web and surface insights and uncover different patterns that, evidence what's actually happening in the wild and what things threat actors are actively exploiting. And then business apps is also another very important component. So there's a wealth of information that's relevant to vulnerability management that lives in a bunch of unstructured data sources, tribal knowledge, these different data points that are strewn across the enterprise. So we'll bring all of that in. We give the ability for our customers to toss any other, more ad hoc data sources at us as well. So we're fusing that together. And then from there, we have the ability to detect 0 days at a very rapid rate. So supplementing scanners and filling the gap before scanners are actually picking up on new vulnerabilities. We have autonomous investigation capabilities. So all these steps in the life cycle, everything from who's the right owner, is this vulnerability reachable? What might happen if I try to patch this asset? Can it cause a breaking change and potential business impact? All of that is being handled, and not by humans, but by machines who are doing this in real time. And then finally, the nirvana state that a lot of us aspire towards, autonomous remediation. Right. So given all the context, given the information, how do we take the risk off the table as quickly as possible, and not have so many dependencies on all this ops work and all these intermediate steps? So part one here, of some of the capabilities that are new for Cogent and especially impactful in this post-Mythos world. Number one, 0 day response, right? So the way that this works is it does not assume that scanners are the be all and end all, right? It's one data source. We have to fill that gap before the scanners are picking up on new vulnerabilities. And so to do so, we ingest dozens of intelligence sources. That could be everything from news articles to very specialized feeds. So figuring out what's out there. From there, we do this inferencing, understanding your inventory, piecing that together from different tools and insights that we can gather. That's where the internal business context becomes very helpful. We can match those things together. Say, here, Mr. Customer, we think you're exposed. Score the risk for you based on asset criticality, controls, all these different elements, and then actually route the findings to remediation with the proper owners, with the proper actions, SLAs, so on and so forth. So really helping to drive the whole life cycle and fill that detection gap in the early part of the VM process. So you look at, typical flow here, right? Takes several days for scanners to add detections. With 0 day response, Cogent is now detecting the vuln and figuring out what's going on. In some cases, seconds or minutes after it's first disclosed, and ahead of when exploitation actually happens, right? So this is a way of using AI to really shift the battleground and the calculus here, and give defenders the upper hand again. And you see examples here. If you go to Cogent.com, you'll find a number of case studies on the website, and Fortune 1000 companies, notable brands able to leverage these capabilities and really accelerate both the remediation velocity as well as the discovery velocity. The other piece of the picture that's really valuable and important is autonomous remediation, right? So anybody can go look at their scanner and try to implement that guidance. But the difficulty, right, is that oftentimes these scanner recommendations, the things that you get out of the box, there's no context awareness about the environment, right? So it doesn't factor in how easy or hard it is to make a change. It doesn't factor in the potential production risk. But in actual operational environments, you can't just arbitrarily do whatever you want, right? And in some cases, actually, we have customers in hotel business and casinos. You could patch a vulnerability, cause downtime. That could actually be a worse thing than getting breached, right? And so that business context is very often missing, as is the control, right? And so a lot of burden then gets placed on the human to do all the work, which is error prone, time consuming, and not conducive to getting remediation to be completed quickly. So the way that our autonomous remediation works, we evaluate the search space. There's a lot of ways you can fix a vulnerability, right? You can patch it, you can mitigate it, you can decommission an asset. We figure out the best fix that makes sense in terms of strategy, in terms of detailed steps, score the impact, not only from a risk perspective, but also in terms of what the production impact might be. We have a concept called zones of autonomy. So letting folks set these autonomy levels by policy across different factors. So you can say, okay, for this type of asset, this type of aspect of my environment, let Cogent run and handle everything. In other cases, maybe keep a human in the loop. In other cases, do nothing. So giving people that flexibility to adjust. integrates with and executes through existing tools. So, non-invasive, not requiring new agents. I think in most security organizations, with the proliferation of tools that are out there, the number one step that you can take and the most efficient way to operate is figure out how to get more operational leverage and do more with less, right? So, versus, getting all these different new capabilities in place, is there something that can help to actually harmonize all the data you already have and better leverage it to get greater success? And then confirming fixes on rescan, tracking reliability, feeding that data back to further improve confidence in pushing for further autonomy. So just double clicking on one of the concepts that I mentioned, zones of autonomy, right? This is a great example, right? So the typical customer journey we see, people like to start with human in the loop, an assistive mode of operation. So Cogent is basically recommending fixes, humans are reviewing, they're doing the execution, they're in that process building trust. Anytime there's an error, they feed that back into the system, and Cogent continues to learn and get smarter. Then people sometimes say, hey, look, this is so great. We don't want to execute anymore. We just want to approve. So that's step two, right? For some types of things in the environment, Cogent packages everything up, puts it on the silver platter. Someone can press a button, just let Cogent go and execute. And then, finally building up towards full autonomy with the right policy guardrails and safe deployments, right? That could start with laptops. It could start with dev environments in the cloud, kind of picking the zones where you have the most comfort and then continuing to expand from there. With the aspiration of ensuring that everything that fits into the moderate to high security risk and low to moderate production risk matrix is now being eliminated as quickly as possible. The dream eventually also is you have the magic button, you press the button, and everything gets fixed automatically. I think we are a ways away from that as an industry. Lots of difficulties with imperfect information and really getting to the confidence that we're not going to cause problems. And it is really a tension point that we have to manage between security, but also availability. So important things for everyone to keep in mind. And that's why we've built the system in this way, is to really to let every customer kind of pick their point on the curve and determine just how much autonomy that they feel comfortable with. Another piece of this that's super important is confirming and validating that the work being done is actually successful, right? So sometimes tickets are marked closed, but validation scans later have a different result, and very, very difficult to know what the actual status is of these things. And so Cogent has a bunch of different mechanisms we leverage, whether it's hooking into patch management tools, looking at the scanners, also validating through ITSM and ticketing systems. So taking all that data, confirming that when a remediation is allegedly applied, it was actually successful, intervening if it wasn't, and then tracking the metrics correspondingly. So really helping to make sure that that last mile is as buttoned up as possible. And again, get another case study here. You see how organizations that are moving into the world of autonomous remediation are seeing huge declines in MTTR, huge declines in manual effort, and actually teeing their programs up to be competitive, right, in this world where attackers are moving so fast. So kind of summarizing here, right? you know, in the past, we had these programs. It kind of made sense for the world we lived in, static, slow moving, hackers taking lunch breaks, right? And so it was fine to have the vulnerability disclosed, learn about it later in your environment, and then ultimately fix it. Now that's completely broken. Attackers are coming after these things much faster and before existing processes will work. The only path forward is to compress everything and respond at machine speed. And through that acceleration, I'm actually very optimistic that with good AI, it's very, very powerful, fighting the bad AI, we might actually end up in this offset state where there's full neutralization of threat actors and we're actually much more secure. But it's going to take time to get there, and attackers always have the upper hand in the short term, which is why making investments in your program now is a very important and wise thing to do. So concrete recommendations for me, and this is independent of Cogent, right? I think next time zero day drops, obviously these are scary moments, they're high risk moments, but at the same time, they're opportunities to stress test your program, right? And through these types of exercises, you get to learn how long does it take us to know about it? How did we react? What stakeholders had to be involved? What were the bottlenecks? And so by analyzing all these different things, you get data points, you get insights that help you harden your program and improve it for the future. Second thing I would advocate for, audit your vulnerability ops gaps. And some of that is scanning and knowing where you have the right scanning and telemetry and what the shortcomings of that could be, but also other hygiene and foundations, right? So how good is your asset inventory, ownership model, remediation processes and clarity of expectations there. Some of these things are just the foundations, right, that ultimately automation has to run on. And if those foundations are shaky, then you end up in a situation where, any automation that you try and build on top is just going to lead to a negative outcome, because that unstable foundation is going to cause everything on top to topple over. So, my recommendation here is, kind of invest in these areas. And then from a Cogent perspective, obviously customers bring us in to go and address and solve for some of these use cases. But another thing that we also do just to really help the community is meet those risk assessments, right? So short-term engagements, plug us into your different tools. We give you the lay of the land and your posture report. Here's where the risk lies. Here's the types of things that you might want to bake into your security roadmap. Um, and really helping organizations build their strategy for how they retool and reshape for the era that's to come. So that is the quick summary on our end of what's happening in the threat landscape, where programs need to move, and how Cogent can help. Bala, I saw you come off mute if you want to add anything, and then from there, happy to transition to audience questions.
No, that is perfect, Vineet, because it also put, there are a couple of questions have also been has come up by from Sunil. So maybe I'll ask that one and we can answer, and we can also open the mic for the others to ask the questions as well on the over the mic. But I'll answer, repeat the question here. Maybe we can answer that one. So Sunil has asked, like, how do we validate the patch doesn't cause any issues in the application? So that was the first question. So maybe I'll answer that one, and maybe you can add on top of that one, Vinny, that will be perfect. So one of the things that we do is like, again, it is the advantage of having an AI that when it goes and comes out and provides you the information about the any vulnerabilities and the fixes that needs to be applied, it also goes and tells you, like, if there is an application that is running and it is compatible or not. For example, if there is a SAP running and you have to patch it, it will go and tell you, like, whether it is supported or not. And then you can take what will be the impact. So for every fix that we apply, we go and provide you. If there is a impact in analysis is also done and provided to you so that you can take a call. And that is where it comes, like, human approver in place or human led. You can actually go and review that one and then approve it. Maybe we need, if you want to add anything on top of it.
Correct. And it all comes down to data, right? So, us being in the execution loop, we see a lot of things in terms of patch efficacy, breaking changes. One example with a customer several months ago, there was some insight we were able to pull from a document and, reference the risk of breaking changes. And so things like that become helpful. And then obviously there's in some environments better, test suites and things like that we can use to verify and confirm that certain behavior is as expected. And over time, one thing that's really differentiated about our approach, we have a research team that comes from Google DeepMind. So folks that really are on the frontier of AI, and they have a number of capabilities that they're cooking up to actually help with this exact question that we're probably not allowed to disclose just yet. But it really is a fascinating area, and it's the hardest problem in this space.
Um, the second question again from Sunil is that we have a lot of Kubernetes container pods. How does your product works in this environment? So maybe I'll answer and then you add it on top of that one beneath again. So we do work with the any of your orchestration tools that you're using it to go and have manage your Kubernetes uh, pods, right? Say for example, Carpenter or similar tools that you are using it. So we can integrate with them and see how we can go and integrate with them to go and do the take the actions. So that is one of the things that we do. As Vineet has mentioned, we are least intrusive. So we go and work with the existing workflows, existing tools that you are having it, instead of having, again, agents being deployed using our own tool, providing another tool for you to go and use it. We go and work with the existing tools.
Correct. And I think one of our strengths also is having asset context, right? So we don't treat every single entity that can have a vulnerability as being the same. We have all these properties of the asset that we're understanding. What type of asset is it? Is it ephemeral? All these different things. And that ties very closely into the remediation as well, right? So it's all about tying to the root cause as much as we can, um, and ensuring that the remediations that we're recommending are safe and practical. But bottom line is we work with diverse environments across the board, so scalable in that regard.
So the next question is from 𝐜𝐡𝐚𝐧𝐠. So your AI agent, if it is under a finite context window, how do you make changes or trade-offs on how deeply it analyzes the complex multi-layer code paths? So that is the question. Maybe I'll pass it on to you, Vineet, if there is something that you want to answer that one.
Yeah, it's a good question. So in general, from an architectural standpoint, there's a number of things that we do, right? So in the context of code in particular, um, we run in a multi-agent kind of architecture, right? So it's an ensemble of multiple agents working together. And the key is to not overload with too much data or too many tasks, right? And to instead keep the responsibility set, if you will, very contained. That helps to some degree to limit any risks of running out of context and things like that. But at the same time, it also really helps because there's error correction that you can bake in. And so putting the right guardrails around each agent component, making sure that these things are intersecting closely together. And then there's certain use cases, for example, like code reachability and things like that. That's not so much the focus of Cogent. We operate a little bit more on the infrastructure side of things. Um, but of course, like tons of advances that are happening there just from the labs themselves, right? Anything that touches the SDLC, um, Anthropic, OpenAI, lots of fascinating things that they're working on. And so that will continue to play an increasing role in terms of analyzing code paths and improving the security of them.
The next question is from Ashwini Bhatia. So, if I enable full autonomy today, what are the top two, three controls that ensure AI cannot create business outage? Please suggest controls.
Yeah, so one control, right, is just where do you let the autonomy run, right? So, like we talked about in terms of the zones of autonomy, um, maybe you want to, go and start with a bunch of things being human-led and only a small slice being fully autonomous, right? Very likely the intern's Chrome being auto-updated might not be the end of the world, right? So, there's controls in that regard of just limiting the scope of what the AI can do. There's obviously controls that can be put in place in terms of process and things like that. If and when an outage ever happens, if downtime is ever taken, how do you come back up and recover from that? And we do as much as we can upfront to front load the analysis and make sure that any change that we're making is safe in our execution path on the Cogent side, as in when we detect any sort of anomalies, errors, issues, we might have some intelligent retries that run, we might have rollbacks, or we might pause execution, right? So, those are all strategies. And then actually the final piece is, especially for, certain types of patches and infrastructure, having a smart rollout strategy, right? So starting in dev and then rolling out to prod. Maybe you cluster assets that are similar, start with one, confirm everything's good, then progress to a broader wave. And so that's of course another mitigation is versus doing everything at once. And now you have a bunch of conditional probabilities that might all hit. Instead, you're sort of gaining your confidence before you increase the potential production risk.
One thing for the audience here is like if you just post your questions on the Q&A instead of webinar chat because it has to be open too. So just post your questions on the Q&A's window, right? So please. Now the next question, is from Avinash Tiwari. So does Cogent cover all modules like the OS types and application component patches? Does Cogent replace other patching tools? So that was the question. Maybe this is one of the easiest question. I'll take it up, Vinith. That we don't replace. We are not looking at ripping and replace any of your existing tools that you are having here. We want it to coexist and use it, and that is where you get the quick ROI on the from the tools that you are like the Cogent that you are implementing, right? Because it has to go and work with your existing tools and get the ROI faster. So we are not going to replace your patching tools. We'll work with your patching tools. And as the modules like OS type and application component patches that you are using through the patching tools that you are having today is what we work with. So the next question is from 𝐜𝐡𝐚𝐧𝐠. If the CTI Intel TTP is novel or TTP is new and not in any Intel ed, then such an untemplated attack techniques, how would your agent's current knowledge base respond to it? So I think we have the work with our LLMs, which we have from which looks for the information that has been published by any vendors or any reporter, like how it is, how it can be, how it is used for attacking using the TTPs, different TTPs. We bring in that not just in a context, in a very limited context, but we look into the internet as well. So Vinith, if you want to add on top of that one for this question.
Yeah, and the focus for us, right, is more on the vulnerability side than the SecOps side. So at the end of the day, it's is there credible evidence that there is a vulnerability? And then secondly, what is the software that it impacts, right? And then we can do all this matching and trace the SBOM and things like that to really validate, hey, this is going to be a potential risk in the environment. Um, the actual TTPs in terms of how attackers are coming after that and evaluating for exploitation and things like that. That's not so much our focus area. It's just saying, hey, here's where you're exposed. Here's how we can take the exposure off your plate as quickly as possible.
Okay. So the next question is like Ashwini Bhatia, who defines the policy guardrails, the customer or Cogent?
The customer. The customer retains full control.
Uh, Vatsal Jain, how can we roll back in case of an outage due to patching? Would the agent help in rollback as well? Yes, we
Roll,
do.
rolls back whenever possible. So that's the idea. And obviously there's some constraints based on the nature of the environment. One thing that you can do is you set Cogent up is you have the ability to program context into it. And so defining some of the way your organization operates, your tools, your practices. But so long as we're able to, in the context of the environment, that reversion capability is valuable.
Excellent. So Parag Mitra, would you be also having the GRC feature within this tool? If not, how? If not now, but eventually?
I think one thing that is very interesting for us is that we sit on a lot of data that's very fascinating, and we do a bunch of very deep analysis on it, and we have a number of agents that work to contextualize this data and act upon it. So we're not a core GRC platform. Over time, those are use cases we can build in. However, one capability we do have is our agent chat. That's basically your ability in natural language to interface with the agent backend. And through that, you can solve for a number of different use cases, on the GRC side of things. So we see people generating compliance reports and, evaluating if their SLAs make sense and doing all sorts of things. So we do see GRC stakeholders coming into Cogent, but it is more of a tangential benefit versus the core foundational use case.
Manoj Lala has asked like how safe it is to use AI tools in production servers.
It
How
depends on the organization's risk appetite, right? So, it's interesting. We were talking last week with a Fortune 500 manufacturing company. They basically said, if I have a production server on the edge and there's a vulnerability on it that's exploitable, I would rather take the risk of a tool breaking my environment than an attacker breaking my environment. And you have no control and no knowledge of what's going to happen. So it really does come down to risk tolerance. It comes down to the conditions that make the most sense. It comes down to your environment and what the implications are when a specific asset goes down and how fast you can recover from that. And based on all those factors, you have to decide where do you want autonomy, where do you not want autonomy. And in terms of where you don't want autonomy, what a tool like Cogent can do is still serve to you who does what by when, work around change control practices, things like that. Still saves a lot of time, still, compresses the time it takes to go and do the remediation. But ultimately, when we're being attacked by machines, as much as possible, we have to get away from tickets, get away from change control. It's a little bit of an antiquated concept, um, and start building towards automatic fixes end to end.
So we have two questions from Raghav Gandhi. So he said, like, how does Cogent AI ensures data privacy and prevent sensitive enterprise data from being retained or used for model training, especially in regulated industries?
So we do not train on customer data. So that's an important principle, and I think something that a lot of our customers mandate. And then there's also intelligent strategies around the way we look at data management, right? So, first of all, with any integration that we're plugged into, just principle of least privilege, right? Make sure we're reducing the scope as much as possible, and not bringing in anything that we don't need to. And then also, there's a lot of data that we don't need to materialize. So, for example, if we're connected to someone's Jira, we don't need to ingest all of their Jira. We can just retrieve the information we need in real time and then have that flow through the platform and really just look at the insight extracted, and that's the piece that needs to be stored. So a bunch of techniques around that. And then of course, in terms of the core Cogent platform, we have a very robust security program to make sure that all customer data is safeguarded.
Excellent. So the next question, again from Raghav in the same one, is like, what security controls are built into the platform to mitigate the risks such as prompt injection, jailbreak attack, data poisoning, and model hallucinations?
Yeah, we have multiple sanitization layers, right, to help guard against those types of attacks. Obviously, there's tooling, both inbuilt and vendor provided, right, that is leveraged as part of our internal security posture. And then lots of guardrails and constraints. And so, as an agent goes through each step of reasoning, we have certain limitations that we will place and just making sure that we constrain the path and the trajectory based on our priors and what we expect. An example being, if you want to recommend a remediation, there's only so many things that make sense, right? Again, you can patch, mitigate, decommission, but there's certain things that just like do not make sense or not relevant, right? So you can actually reframe a number of these things into a classification problem, and in doing so, kind of bound the trajectory of the agent and really reduce the probability of errors.
And I think this question from Ashwini Bhatia has been asked by a lot of customers as well. It's a very small question, but it has got a lot of power because today everyone is looking at this literacy one. So the question here from Ashwini Bhatia, Vineet, is that any specific skills required by our SOC team to start using it? So I think that has been the question that a lot of customers are asking today, like, how much learning that my team need to have it. So
Yeah,
is
I think we we pride ourselves on being UX first and simple, right? I think there's a lot of complexity in this space. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of clunky tools that require you to get certifications. Our goal is you just log in and just immediately know what's going on and be able to kind of get things done, and it should actually make you more productive. So usually people need to spend some time setting things up, but they get the lay of the land and a sense of how to operate Cogent, in the span of hours. It's very intuitive and straightforward. And I think that ties into like, just more broadly on literacy, right? Like what is the role of humans in a security program over time? It's probably not, chasing people over Slack and Teams and project managing vulnerabilities and doing all this work. It's probably more of thinking about architecture, secure by default. How do we make ourselves smaller as an organization and reduce our attack surface? Things that require a lot of creative thought, strategic thought, trade-offs with the business, collaboration with other teams. I think those are more and more the types of areas that humans really need to excel and thrive at. And then a lot of this, like, kind of blocking and tackling work, I think we can use the agents to really accelerate that as much as possible.
So there are a two-part question that has come again from Parag Mitra. And what he was talking is like, one related to the data that we are keeping. That is, how are we catering to the data privacy, and especially with India coming out with its DPDP law, that is data privacy and data protection law. How are we actually addressing that one? That is first part. And second part is like, how do we look at neutralizing the false positives? So one is more primarily from the regulation perspective, other one is mostly from the operation side, like how do we manage the false positives as well?
Yeah. On the first one, Bala, you actually may be more equipped to answer that one.
Yeah. So what we are, the first thing that we are looking at from the data privacy side is that we are looking at having the data residency within the India. So that is one thing that we are looking at having, not leaving the country. So we'll have the one, and we also have all the, security controls in place to protect the data that is coming. And one of the things that Vineet has also mentioned earlier on the training is like we don't train on your data. That means like you're segregating your data completely from others, and we are not learning from your data to look at the overall, from the training our own platform. Second is like we have a separate instance for each customers that we are building it. So that is also addresses the need from the DPDP side. So we are SOC 2 Type 2 compliant. We also follow the ISO 27001, which actually addresses a lot of things that are coming from the DPDP side. So we also go and address the DPDP part in much more detail through those compliances, along with the other custom got the security things that we are actually maintaining at our platform side. So that is something that I address. And from the false positive side, we do take, so false positives is a challenge. So what we are looking at is like we are going to have the way to go and identify, ask the user to go and say like these are the false positives, learn from those false positives, and make sure that from the future perspective we are actually not triggering. But anything that you want to add on top of that one, we need from false
Yeah,
positives.
in the Cogent platform, you can track and manage false positives. So from a workflow perspective, everything is managed. Again, customers can specify these things. And then there's like some light inference capabilities that we have, and we'll continue to develop this further over time. The one nice benefit of the prioritization that we're doing, though, is that we're typically shrinking the volume of vulnerabilities that we surface by 10 to 100x in terms of the things that we're telling people to focus on. So naturally, the volume of false positives is also going to go way down. So, the prioritization and focusing on things like exploitability and impact, that actually helps in an indirect way as well, because the net volume of things that you now have to pay attention to is a fraction of what it otherwise would be.
Perfect. So the one question has come from a practical operational part here, Vinit. That is, there is a vulnerability confirmed by Microsoft, but the patch is not available. So Microsoft has released the patch for Defender. In this scenario, what are your thoughts? Has not yet to release the patch for Defender. In this scenario, what is your thoughts of protecting the environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think when the patch is not available, you have to mitigate, right? And so, the way I kind of think about the vision here, right? It's AI agents that are the sentinel watching over your environment, finding and fixing attack paths in real time, right? And so sometimes you can patch to break the attack path, sometimes you have to mitigate, sometimes maybe you quarantine. And so if certain of those options are not possible, you have to take other actions. I think, the way the programs used to work in the past, talking to a lot of organizations, you see if a patch is not available, and then that gives you the right to deprioritize, right? But that doesn't make any sense, right? If the patch is not available, you still have risk. So it's about finding alternative mechanisms to take the risk off the table, or at least make it less, even if you can't fix the root of the issue necessarily.
So the last question that I see it here is like, can Cogent tool be integrated with the enterprise ITSM? Again, it's an easy question. I'll take it up, Vinit. So yes, we do integrate with the ITSM tool, ServiceNow, or it is Jira, or you're talking about, Manage Engine, anything. So we go and do integrate with those tools. So it's a out of the box integration that we have it. So, and it is also one of the core capability that any solution that should be having it should have, and we are having it much more in-depth integration by bidirectional, looking at the data, not only from the ticketing perspective, but also we take the CMDB data. Um, Last one that has come up again, Vinith, maybe we have got only 1 minute, so we'll take this one. That is again from 𝐸𝐸 saying that if one is moving data outside the sandbox securely, does it require complex deterministic guardrail? If so, then it may sometimes slow down the remediation pipeline for complex multi-tiered software architecture. So how does Cogent handle it?
Maybe repeat the first part of the question one more
Yeah,
time.
if one is moving data outside the sandbox securely, Does it require complex deterministic guardrail? If so, then it may sometimes slow down the remediation pipeline for complex multi-tier software architecture. I'm not.
Yeah, I think that there's a number of complex cases that come up, and environments are different. So, the beauty of Cogent again, right, is because you have the ability to tune the environment and kind of like fine tune the way that Cogent operates on your specific context. There's a lot of fluidity and flexibility there, right? So the broad statement I'll make without addressing maybe this specific instance is, if there's a risk of some sort of operational issue, you could potentially bypass that, right? Or kind of instruct the agents to operate in a different way to lessen the potential impact there. It's a little bit hard to have a specific answer without going a little bit more into the details of this scenario. But the only way to solve this is with a agentic system that can do deterministic things and leverage deterministic tools, as opposed to, kind of like hard-coded programmatic approaches that don't scale in a general fashion and won't actually get good outcomes if it with a one-size-fits-all sort of mechanism.
Perfect. So I think we have end. So there's one, they say asking about VA tools. Yes, we do take the data from any of your VA tools that you have it, either from the on-prem, from the cloud, from the infra, from the application side. We do take the data. So existing tools, we ingest it. So that's a straightforward answer. Anything else, please do reach out. I'll be happy to help you to take you through the solution and have the session with you guys to demonstrate the platform as well. So I think it has been a very interactive questions that has come across as Vineet and Vikas. So thank you very much for keeping it really interactive. So
Great, great. Thanks, Bala. Thanks, Vineet. Very interactive session. I would still like to have one live question, guys. That's a format we have kept. So let's see if anybody wants to ask a live question. We have time. So yeah, Parag, go ahead. Like, ask the question now. You can unmute yourself.
Hi, am I audible?
yes.
Yeah, Parag, go ahead.
Okay, I had the last question, last but not the least. I'm very, very excited by the way you all had presented this. Congratulations. It gives us a lot of, lights on this. I had only one question. Now that we are moving towards completely automated driven, I would say security. Here also I have one question which I keep on asking and coming back. How much of human in the loop or human on the loop involvement do we have? With everything being served to us on a platter with so much of an assurance, but still a human intervention is very much required. So how much of involvement do humans have in this particular regard? That's it.
I still think that humans do have a lot of room for involvement. It should be much, much less comparatively, right? But it's in a number of different ways, right? I think one of the different ways is context. So you can be integrated with all the different data sources in the world, um, but at the same time, you could have some data point that's very beneficial that lives in the head of some person that's worked at a company for 25 years and it's not written down anywhere, right? So humans intervening, sharing their tribal knowledge and encoding the context, and then also like validation, right? So a system can do a lot of work to, produce some sort of output and kind of serve things up. But, as it's going and doing that, how can you have the confidence that it's the right thing, right? And so the human actually, in a way, is training, coaching the AI, right? Helping it to make better decisions, almost like a new employee, right? That's the best analogy to use. It's like imagine you hired a team of 50 smart IIT grads, right? And they're excited and they're ready to work hard, but they need to be coached up a little bit and they need to be trained. You're creating this feedback loop. It's almost like reinforcement learning to make sure the AI system continues to get better and better over time.
Great. Let's take next question from Amit. Amit, go ahead, unmute yourself, and you can ask your question now. If not Amit,
Am I
then
audible? Hello?
yeah. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, thanks, Bala and Vineet. Excellent presentation. My question is a little bit enhanced on the earlier question, and it's on the other side. As we start, automating through AI, and the human in the loop, the human part starts depleting. Later on, how do you ensure that the humans are also well versed to take the judgment and to be able to take the decisions? Because as they go away due to automation, they will not have a context after 2 years or 3 years. The AI is going to have the context. So the tables are going to turn. So how do you ensure that the human in the loop adds value, let's say 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line?
I think it's a really interesting question on just, dynamics of labor and, it's not just security, right? This could be in any industry. Um, Quite frankly, we don't fully know because, in the environments that we operate in, security team, responsibilities maybe have changed a little bit, but, we haven't played out that full time horizon. I think just in conversations we've had with security leaders who are pondering the same thing, they like to keep a couple SMEs that are very close to the details of what's actually happening, and really it's the up leveling. It's almost like treating the human as a hands-on manager versus the executor, right? And so they're still in the details, they're aware of what's going on, but they're just not tasked with doing all the day-to-day nitty-gritty work. And also, I think it's a little bit premature to imagine AI is going to go and solve for everything. It can provide a huge, huge uplift, but also talking to a lot of security leaders, what many of them say is like, I don't actually know that the net outcome is going to be that much more dramatic because the threat landscape is getting so much more intense, right? So if I have 10x the vulnerabilities and the same amount of human work, well, really, I've just been able to use AI to go and tread water, right? So we'll see how all of this plays out over time. Um, but it is an important question to ask and just continue to manage over time, right? Is what is the role of AI and humans in each function, and how do we ensure that coexistence and collaboration is as smooth as possible?
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks for it.
Mohammed, you are up for next question. You can unmute yourself and ask your question. Mohammed Samniwala. If not, then we still have a couple of more minutes. That's because there's just one wheel of fortune, so we can spare time on asking questions. So if anybody else wants to ask question, if not, then thank you very much, guys. Let's go to the wheel of fortune.